This is YDIDPod, where we talk all things sibling loss and grief. I am Kat.
And I'm Kim. And in today's episode, very excitingly, we are talking about the 5 stages of grief.
We are. So, first of all, shout out to Mr. Walsh for teaching me, being my first teacher, about the 5 stages of grief. And the 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So let's jump into denial. When you are going through this part of the process, sometimes it will manifest and look a lot like avoidance, anxiety. Avoidance, I think, is the big one for most of us. So what was your experience with the denial stage?
So I think it was immediate, first of all. I feel like
I agree with that in my experience too.
As soon as I found out that Brady had passed, I was like,
Right. This is not right.
I think I've shared, and I know we're going to go in depth into it at another time, but I think I literally said to my mom, like, I can't do this right now. Like, I immediately, my brain was like, no, absolutely not.
I do remember you saying that last week.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And so, very much an instant thing. When I got home to my family after finding out to go be with everybody, I literally walked into my parents' home expecting my brother to be there. Because every time I had ever gone there, he was there.
Right.
And then also because there was a lot of confusion around his death, and there was a lot of, we didn't really have a lot of details.
Right away.
Because
they were still investigating, right? Like what had happened at the work site.
And we didn't know if he was alone, I think my brain was very like, he's going to come home right now. Like this is a mistake.
I remember you saying that the last time we talked, you were like, you got the wrong person.
Yeah, I was like, this has to be some big mistake. He's going to like drive into the driveway and be like, what the fuck, Kim, why are you home? Like, why is everybody here?
Right. So like for you, it was like immediate.
Instant, just full on. My brain was like, absolutely not.
We are not doing this.
We are not doing this. But again, like my brother was my best friend. And also I think there's a whole other layer to it because I had just been with him. Yeah. Like the week before he had come down to Boston to visit me.
Right.
We had spent the weekend together. So I remember saying to Mike when he was driving us up to Maine after we had found out, I was like, he was just fucking here.
Yeah.
He was just in this car with us.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the point about denial where there's like that confusion and shock where you're just like,
how?
Like it's not even it's not conceivable.
Yeah, like it just didn't seem physically possible because
you just saw him.
It just like he was just in my grasp. It felt like, and then all of a sudden he was gone, and it was like
instantly
the instantaneous and the permanence of the situation. And the like, what do you mean I will do it? Like I don't know. There's just a lot of layers, but yeah, my brain was instantly like, wrong. No, that's not right.
That's interesting.
Yeah, very
But I can
much.
understand why because of our experiences have been different, and like you said, you had seen him literally the week before.
I had just seen him.
Yeah,
and it was just, and again, I think all of the, not even the confusion, just the lack of information we had. We didn't have any answers.
Right.
So I was like, well, you can't tell me what happened, so why should I accept that as truth? Like, and also, no one had seen him or the set, like anything.
Yeah, that's that shock.
So it was like it's almost like there was this blank space of uncertainty, and so my brain was like, I'm absolutely not going there until I have like proof.
Yeah.
Which sounds very morbid and dramatic, but like it just was like I was fully like,
no one can tell you you're grieving wrong. There's no right or wrong way to do that.
I was fully like, he's gonna think this is so funny. He's gonna be like, what the fuck?
Why are you guys all hanging out here? Why are you
guys all
Kim,
here?
Why are you home?
I just saw you. You missed me that bad? Like, so my brain instantly, and it was very much a protection mechanism as well. Like,
yeah, definitely.
It just was like, no.
That's
I don't know.
interesting.
I don't know what actually is happening, but it's not this.
Right.
You know,
that's interesting because I feel like, so I want to say too, like the interesting thing about the stages of grief is that I think in my experience, if you don't have similar backgrounds to what you and I have, like you have a spiritual practice and a spiritual business. I'm in mental health. We've both obviously gone through loss prior to this. I would not say complex traumatic loss, but still loss. And I think when you don't have a lot of experience with grief, there's this expectation like it's A and then it's B and then it's C. First it's denial, then it's anger, then it's bargain. And it's like, that's actually not how it works. It's like you're going to bounce all over the place a few different times, multiple times throughout your life. So it was interesting for me. I didn't hit denial first. I think I hit bargaining first. For me, denial it came a lot later. I did see my brother, I think, a week to 10 days prior to him passing. And he was doing really good, actually, I have to say. Like, I remember we took the dog for a walk. He was in like a much better space than he had been previously because, again, my brother was struggling with his own mental health. He was self-medicating. And, you know, with that comes a lot of its other problems too. And we were in the middle of a pandemic. So he wasn't isolating by choice, but we were all being forced to isolate. So he had not been doing good, and I remember seeing him like 7 to 10 days before he passed, and he was doing really, really well. So for me, I think I hit that bargaining point before I hit denial, because even though he was doing well, there was a part of me that always feared that we were going to lose him because he was struggling with substance abuse. So I didn't hit my denial until later, maybe a few weeks to a month in, and it was playing out in my brain. It was playing out as like, well, he's just gotten himself arrested. He's just in jail. And I want to clarify for anyone listening, my brother was not a criminal. But when you are struggling with substance abuse, let's be honest, like the reality is a lot of those people end up, you know, incarcerated because substance abuse makes you do really desperate things and unsafe things to sometimes the community you're living in. So not that he was a terrible person, but that was what made the most sense to my brain, was like, oh, he has been struggling. He's either in rehab or in jail. Like, he's gonna come back.
Your brain like created an environment that made more sense.
That made him, because jail was safer for him than 6 feet under in my brain.
What's really interesting is that, and I know we're going to get into this at another time, but when I was having my like trauma dreams after Brady passed, I had dreams of him dying in all of these different ways that were similar to what actually happened. Almost like my brain being like, this is what happened. This is what happened.
Trying to make sense of it, right?
But then also I was having dreams where I was aware that he wasn't around. And so it became like, oh, I'm going to visit him in jail. Like it really is just like your brain being like, he's away. You can't see him. You can't like have access to him every day. So it's really interesting that like, that's what your brain was doing in a more conscious way. And that's when my subconscious was like, he's in jail when you're sleeping.
Yeah, it's really interesting how like grief plays out, because it's so different. Like the 5 stages are the 5 stages because everybody does go through them, but everybody experiences them like so vastly differently.
Well, and to add to what you were saying about how like we go through them over and over and sometimes in different orders, I almost feel like because they're called stages, people expect like, I went through the denial process.
I got through the first part, so now I'm moving on.
And I'm never going to go back to that. And that is just so not the case.
No, it's
Spoiler
not.
alert.
It's not. And don't gaslight yourself if that's what's happening, because I feel like it can be really easy to be like, well, I thought I already processed the denial and the anger. Why am I back at denial again? And it's like, well, because processing trauma comes in waves.
Yeah, and I really feel like instead of calling them stages, it should be like, I don't know.
Like points.
Yeah, you just bounce around.
like bullet points of grief instead of stage. Because I think you're right. I think the way that we word things, like...
Or like a cycle. Like, you know, because it does feel very cyclical. Even if it's not in the same order, you're always moving through a different layer of it. And sometimes it lasts a day. Sometimes it's a couple hours that it like bubbles up, and then you work through it, hopefully, right?
And I think that's actually why it comes in stages. It's because it bubbles up a little, and then you process it, and it kind of...
Well, you deal with it and process it, or you cope, right? It's one or the other.
Exactly.
So, and then it'll come back in a different way, in a different moment, where you go into a different part. And
speaking of different parts, let's talk about anger. So the next stage, for lack of a better word.
I live here.
Same. I am a Scorpio, so there's a lot of pent up anger. No, we were actually just talking about this literally before we sat down and started this episode, but I would generally not consider myself an angry person. I'm a very happy, goofy person, and I've been so angry the past 4 years. So the pieces the part of anger, I think, that people don't really realize is a lot of it actually stems from anxiety. It stems from that unknown. And for me, I mean, I've been angry. I'm still angry. And I know you are too, but like, how did that come up for you when you first kind of started processing all this? Like, within the first, couple days or months or weeks?
I think the anger for me stemmed from, like, there's no one else that I'm going to get and, like, have the relationship that I had with Brady. Like, I'm not it just doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist in anyone else. It doesn't exist anywhere else.
That's my only brother.
It's my only brother, and also it's just him.
Yeah.
Like, he just was, and I think anybody that knew him would agree. Like,
I think both of our Gemini boys were like that.
Yes. And so I think my anger also stemmed from, there were a lot of things that Brady wanted to do in his life that he just didn't get to do. And there were a lot of things that he was made to do that he didn't get to do. And also, in retrospect, being angry with if I would have had him come down on this day instead, he would have been with me.
Yeah.
And it might not have happened.
Yeah.
Or, like, I think I hold a lot of anger because I'm the big sister. I'm supposed to protect him.
Yeah.
Like, I'm his
failed.
protector, and this has to be my fault.
Yeah.
And
I can relate to that. I feel like there was a lot of anger at myself for, like, and I think it's different with our brothers, but like with my brother, I have a background in mental health. I have a fucking degree in mental health. I am currently in school continuing my education and plan to continue to do so. I have so many skills. I've helped so many kids. So for me, it was like, I've helped more kids than I can even count, and I couldn't help my own fucking brother.
Right.
Yeah, I think it definitely feels like a personal failure sometimes, especially as the older sibling, because there is that like level of like responsibility and protection.
Well, right, we're raised being like, you need to take care of your siblings, you need to take care
Look
of
out
your
for your brother. And I don't know about your parents, but my parents, and I think this is a part where I have anger, and I probably won't. I hope I can let go of it, but I don't know if I ever will, because my parents were really big on instilling in us that we only had each other. Like, of course we had our parents, but my parents were always very clear, like,
that's your person. When you don't have us, that's who you
have. And we are the only, and it was just us. Right. So my parents were always like, it's always going to be you two. You always have your brother, you always have your sister. And I think that's where some of my anger comes from, where, of course, my parents, I'm not mad at my parents.
But it feels like they lied to you.
Yes, but there's a part of me that was like, that's not true.
You lied.
And that's the inner child stuff coming out.
It's like, you said that we were going to be together forever.
And I think that's a worthwhile thing mentioning too, is like, while you're going through the stages of grief, especially I think while you're grieving a sibling, somebody whom you grew up with, somebody whom grew you and you grew them, there's a lot of inner child shit that's going to come up. A lot. Yeah.
I feel like, so the anger came from not being able to protect him. Yeah. But also, working through that is like, he was an adult, we're adults, and like it's not anyone's fault. It was very much his time.
Yeah.
But also just the anger of like, in the most selfish ways, like not getting to have him at our wedding.
Yeah.
And not being able to watch him become a dad.
Yeah.
Or watch him get married. And like, he wanted those things more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to not not even like that, like he didn't get to do that, but like in a selfish way of like, I don't get to witness that.
No, I definitely relate to that.
And yeah, I think, and also like the anger that came up through the external
pressures. Yeah. And like,
not even the pressures, the external anger that came up through watching how other people were experiencing everything.
Yeah.
And feeling angry because I felt misunderstood, or because I felt like people didn't get it, or people didn't care enough.
That's super, no, that's like, can we just talk about the elephant in the room? Because that is, I think, really a big piece of where my anger came from. Like, yes, it was because I wasn't a huge part of it was not being able to see my brother do, have a family of his own, because to my brother's credit, like, as much as he struggled with substances, he didn't want to struggle with substances. He was trying to stop. He was looking into rehabs. We were just in the middle of a fucking pandemic, and they weren't taking people.
He was going to get to the other side of it.
He was getting close. He was getting a little better, and he wanted that. He loved his girlfriend that he was with very much, and he wanted to have a family, whether it was with her or somebody else. He always wanted to be a dad. So that part is really hard. And then I think part of that part is that other people not understanding that piece and not feeling seen in that is infuriating. It's not frustrating, it's infuriating to not be seen when you're struggling as much as one would struggle when your sibling gets ripped away from you.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like in a way I got really angry also because Brady wanted all of those things. He wanted that future. He wanted to be a dad. He wanted to be a partner to someone. And he had a girlfriend. They were planning on getting married. She had a little girl.
Yeah.
So my family, like my parents had a grandchild dangled in front of them for like a year.
Yeah.
And then we lost them as well. Which is what happens. But
it's hard to watch people move on when it's something that you're living with every single day. And not to say that other people aren't living with it every single day, but I do feel like there's a difference there sometimes to a degree.
And then the anger of just, like, there were people that showed up at Brady's service that I was like, what are you doing? Why are you here? Like, what are you doing? It's
I think that was the only thing that I was grateful for in the middle of a pandemic. There's a huge part of me where my anger actually does stem from the fact that I lost my brother in a pandemic. I couldn't have my entire family at the fucking funeral home. And then when we were even at the funeral home, I love my family. And this is not a judgment on anybody. It was just the circumstances. But it added a layer that was really fucking hard. And some of my family, they were there, they showed up, but they were like, oh, please don't touch me because we're in the middle of COVID, which, I mean, I get it. I'm not saying I don't get it. I am not an anti-vaxxer or anything, but I was grieving. I didn't care if I got COVID, and which, I'm sorry if that offends you, but I needed my people in that moment.
Well, and when James passed, it was literally like a month after COVID started, right?
Literally the world had shut down probably 30 to 45 days before my brother died. But yeah, that's where a lot of my anger stemmed from personally, was like not being able to have a full service for him. But I do have to say, I've been able to find some gratitude in that some of the fuck nuts, and I don't mean this in a, no, actually I do mean this I mean this in the way it's coming out. I was going to sugarcoat, but we're not doing that. There were some people that were in my brother's life that had no business being in his life when he was alive and had no fucking business showing their faces at his service. And I'm really grateful that we were in a position where that wasn't something that was going to be even a potential.
Yeah.
Because just with what we were dealing with at the time with him, he was getting better, we thought, and he was trying to stop using. So I think for my mom, for both of my parents, for certain people to have shown up at those services would have been harmful.
Yeah.
So I try to find a little gratitude in that, where I'm like, well, there's a silver lining there, I guess. All the fuck nuts couldn't come. So our next stage, though, is bargaining. Are you? So the bargaining piece is, I think, for me, it always comes down to like trying to find sense, trying to make sense of it, trying to find a reason.
Yeah. I have a really interesting relationship with this because, again, there was a lot of confusion around what actually happened.
Yeah.
So I feel like this maybe was like delayed for me in a way. And I also think because of my spirituality and where I was coming from, I was very reflective and trying to like put pieces together to make it make sense. And trying to like really utilize everything that I had learned in my practice.
Yeah.
And provide comfort for me, but also be like, it's like what we were talking about earlier. There's nothing that can change it.
Yeah.
Like, I would do anything to have my brother back.
Yeah, of
still
course.
right now, even though I feel at peace with it and I feel like I know it was his time and he's good, he's okay, right? We're the ones that aren't okay, they're okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I wouldn't change it in an
course.
instant if I had any ability to do so. But I think that it's like the take me instead.
That's exactly what's been
like,
bouncing
why
around
is
in my
it
brain
him
this whole time?
Like, why him?
Well, and I feel like we touched on this last week too, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago now at this point. But with having a history of our own history of mental health, I don't know about you, but I know for a fact for myself, I have had intentional near-death experiences. Not anymore.
Yeah.
Disclaimer: we are safe. There's no need for a call to MCI. Everybody here is safe. But when I was younger and in high school, I had in like college, I had an attempt in college. And then I know even before I was suicidal and even after I was suicidal, I've had some near-death experiences. I almost drowned twice when I was a kid in the same weekend. And like really,
sounds like my sister.
like really actually almost drowned. Like I was stuck in the middle of the lake, strapped to something upside down for a hot minute, while the boat was trying to turn around and come find me. So that was scary. And literally probably a few weeks before my brother died, I had a near-death experience. I was almost crushed by something. I actually haven't told anybody this. There's like maybe 2 people I've ever told this to, because it just sounds so insane.
Yeah.
That like literally 3 weeks before he lost him, I was in my parents' shed looking for gardening supplies, and my dad had a shit ton of plywood because he was extending the shed. And I mean, there was a ton of it, and it all just started and I was almost crushed, like, and there was no one home, and I was like screaming. My neighbors couldn't hear me. So like for me, there was this piece of bargaining that I was like, should I have given up that day? Like if I gave up that day, would he still be here?
Yeah.
Or would have my parents have just lost 2 kids within a month?
Right. Right.
So yeah, I think for me, definitely with other near-death experiences, it fucks with my head. But I think also just having that experience with like having mental health, wanting to unalive yourself, there is that
I had
piece of like, take me.
I had the more selfish aspect of it too, where I was like, oh, well, I could never do that now.
Yeah, we touched on that
because
too.
I
Yeah.
saw my family go through that, and I
Yeah,
wouldn't do
of
that
course.
to them intentionally.
Yeah, of course. Well, and I don't know if that's selfish. I think that's growth and perspective. Like
Yeah.
at 17, you don't have that perspective.
Yeah.
Even at 19, I don't know if you have that perspective.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, when you're in your mid-20s and you're watching your family grieve one of their children, it really, I think, clicks in your head. Because I had that thought too, where I was like, holy shit, I can't believe I even at one point in my life thought this was an option, because I could never fucking do this to my family.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that I think mine honestly ties back to what we were talking about earlier too, of like, should I have invited him down at a different time? Could I have done anything differently in our like interactions? Could I have had him stay?
Yeah.
Also, not to like go too spiritual, because I know we'll probably do a dedicated episode, because I know it's not for everyone.
But I think it's worth mentioning.
I have this like hunch that we as souls like know when it's getting to our time.
I believe that too, yeah.
Because there have been a few people that I've known and lost, and other people who I've talked to who have lost people who have had similar experiences, where the person who passes a couple weeks or a couple months before they pass, they'll actually have suicidal ideologies, if not become suicidal, and these are typically people who never struggle with depression, never struggle with mental health to any capacity, and all of a sudden they're like,
well, and it's interesting you say that because my brother and I both, we are both have always been like super goofy fun people, but like also a really strong tendency to be really sad for the both of us. And my brother, it actually happened the opposite way. That's why he was self-medicating, is he had a lot of complex trauma that he wasn't dealing with, because we tell men to swallow their feelings, which is a whole other conversation, but something that's really toxic and I know played a part in what my brother struggled with. And that was just like a very interesting part of it, I guess. Like for me, because he was doing well. Like I was saying, he was doing really well. This was unlike my brother, because he was struggling at the time where he was like, I'm too cool for my family. I just want to be out with my friends. He was also 21 at the time. He died a month before his 22nd birthday. So he was still at that age where like he just wanted to be with his boys. And there was one day I think he called me, which was random, like not something he would generally do. And he was like, hey, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm on my way actually to mom and dad's with the dog. I was going to take a walk around the neighborhood with dad and the dog. And he was like, will you come pick me up? Which super unlike him. And I was like, I mean, we're kind of in the middle of the pandemic and I don't care. Not that I wasn't taking it seriously, but
we didn't know a lot.
But we didn't know a lot at that point. It was like April and the world shut down in January.
No, mid-March. That's why I was saying earlier.
Oh, you're right. It was mid-March.
It was literally like March 16th or something.
I think, oh my God, no, you're right. Yeah. So it was literally like 30 to 45 days.
That's why I was
then.
like, I feel like it was so quick afterwards.
I feel like the timelines, anyone who's, I think, going through this will understand this statement, but like, holy fuck, did I lose time when I started grieving? I even said this to my girlfriend the other day. The last 4 years have been like a blur to me. They're all like one messy year as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, that was the interesting part for me, that like, because that does happen a lot to people when they're getting close to death. And for James, it was the opposite. He was like looking into rehabs. He was looking into detoxes. He was trying to get better. He was making an effort with me and my parents.
But do you think that's because his soul knew and he was trying to be good?
I absolutely believe that's what it was. Because
this is the other part of what I was going to say is, so Brady was like a golden retriever personality of a human. And so it was like 3 months before he passed and he was struggling. All of a sudden, it was the most random thing. Again, this boy grew up watching me go to therapy and struggling with my depression and all of that. And he had never...
He was always a happy boy.
And if he would have been someone to communicate. He was never afraid to have conversations. We're a very open family. And I remember he texted me and he was just like, he messaged me just being like, I just want you to know I love you so much. And I was like, nope.
Pause. Yeah. Because I know what that means.
And I called my mom.
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, this is what's going on. He's not okay right now. Yeah. And then,
I believe, I to your point, I definitely think that our souls know.
Yeah. And then he was fine. It was like a weekend and then he was fine. And then he carried on with life, and then he was like, I'm gonna come down and see you, like, sorry for scaring you, like that kind of thing. And then he came down and saw me. Not only did he come down and see me a week before he passed, but he like made his rounds with everyone.
My brother was doing that too. He was making a lot of, like, he was reaching out to my extended family more than he had previously. He was being so nice, and I'm not to say that my brother was an asshole. He's not. When you're struggling with mental health and substance abuse, you don't always have the capacity to show up as your best self. So I'm not saying he was an asshole. He was the best brother in the world. But sometimes the last year of his life, he was a little bit of a little shit.
Brady was always an asshole.
And yeah, that last month or so, like, he was making such an effort with everybody in our family.
With Brady, it was very specific. Like, so he came down to see me. He was like hanging out with all of his friends all week. And then literally the night before he passed, he and my mom had like a sleepover, and he like slept in bed with her, and they like watched movies. So so what's interesting is, like, so now everybody has this like last moment with him. He like went and visited my grandparents, like random stuff.
And that kind of makes the denial phase, I think, almost harder, because you're like,
he was just here.
Yeah, he was just here. And in my experience, well, I think this is true of both of us. Not only was he just here, but like, holy shit, that was such a nice visit that, like, I know I hadn't really been having that experience for a good chunk of my brother's last year, maybe the last like I said, the last like month or two.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And what was interesting is because he came to see me, I have that as my like last memory with him. I couldn't tell you when I saw him before that because again, we live in different states. Yeah. We usually, when I would see him, it would be because I was going up to go home. And, you know, we always saw each other, but he's still like working and doing his, we didn't carve out time. So the fact that it was like, he made time, he came down to Boston to see me. He brought his girlfriend, he brought their little one. And
that's
like,
a far drive from where your parents are,
yeah,
right? That was like three hours?
It's about, I was living in Quincy at the time. It was almost 4 hours.
Okay. So yeah, that's a drive.
But yeah, and like we took them into Boston. We had the little one with us, so we brought her to the Museum of Science. We did the aquarium. Like we did a full day.
Yeah.
We got takeout, hung out at my apartment, and then they went home. And I swear the last time that I like hugged him goodbye, I like gave him a kiss on the cheek, and it just felt different. And again, as someone who like does energetic work, it was weird because I remember it felt different, and I was like, "That's weird."
You know,
but
it's really
you
funny
don't assume
because we're both very energetically sensitive.
But you never assume.
Well,
that
your brain isn't like, well, I hope this is a good hug because you're gonna die next week.
Yeah, your brain, and again,
how your brain is processing.
And again, even if it could be for like a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle, your brain is never going to assume that your younger sibling, let alone sibling in all, is going to, especially again, being the oldest, I'm going before everybody.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely. You guys are burying me. Like, I'm not dealing with this.
Right.
So.
Well, and especially with the way that our families of origin, both of our families raised us, because both of our families are like typical middle class, very hardworking, good people. And I feel like what was instilled in both of us is always family connection. You have each other. That's all you have in this life is each other. You take care of each other. And like to your point earlier, like, of course our parents weren't lying to us, but like, fuck, I feel like I was lied to. I mean, of course I wasn't. I don't blame my parents.
I was promised to have this person to go through all of the hard shit with.
Exactly.
And now he not being here is part of the hard shit. It's the hardest part of it.
Well, and to your point too, and I think this is something, I think you said this to me when I first lost James, and I think this is important. You've already said it once, but I like feel like I need to pause and be like, hey, friend, if you're struggling, this is something I need you to hear. It's harder for us. Yeah. They're fine. They're safe. Whatever you believe in, they're like, I promise you, they're okay.
My mom told me that.
We are not. Your mom is a wise woman.
My mom told me that. She's a Scorpio.
Love her.
Very Scorpio. Yeah.
So speaking of Scorpio things, let's talk about depression, because that is the next phase, which I think, to be fair, we have an interesting relationship with, because I think the both of us as highly sensitive, intuitive people have always been a little bit sad.
I got diagnosed with depression when I was 17, officially. So this is not new information, but wow, the depression you experience with grief is different.
Yeah, it is. It is different than like a depression diagnosis with a symptom of SI. Yeah.
And I also think that depression feels very different for everyone.
Agreed.
For me, it's always been like helplessness, lack of purpose, and like
low motivation.
Yeah, and like no will to live or exist.
Yeah, like nothing there's nothing that's giving life oomph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so with experiencing depression with loss, I feel like it doubled down on me. I feel like it was like, oh, if you really thought there was nothing to live for before, now you don't have your brother.
Amen to that, sister. Like, that's exactly how I felt.
Now you don't have your best friend. Now you have to go through this life that you already don't want to go through.
Right.
Without them.
You've already had this like history of like not being super thrilled you're here. And now there's this layer of like, bitch, you thought.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think that also, you know, people who, whether you're someone who is depressed or you're someone who is going through your own bout of depression, because there's very much a difference.
Yes,
everyone can go through depression, whether you're grieving or not, without being someone who has depression.
Yes, and like that, a lot of that too is not all biological, but a lot of it's biological.
Yeah.
A lot of it is situational, environmental. But a lot of it, like if you are a person that has always struggled with depression, like it's probably something that runs in your family. It's something that may have happened with your mom when you were in gestation, or even when your mom was in gestation with your grandmother.
Or you could be a woman with undiagnosed ADHD and it develops into depression.
I was just gonna say that.
What a bitch.
Because also too, like, not that this is what this podcast is about, but so many women are misdiagnosed with ADHD. They have ADHD and they're diagnosed with borderline personality disorder or a dual diagnosis of depression and anxiety.
Or it's a late in life diagnosis.
Yeah, or it's so late in life, like,
Untreated.
which is what happened to me. I'm almost 30, and my therapist diagnosed me at first with anxiety, and then eventually she was like, "Oh, yes, I see it." And
But
I was like,
anxiety and depression is an after.
they're a dual diagnosis. They come with anxiety. They come with ADHD. But anyways, they're co-occurring. But that's not what we're here to talk about. But anyways, yeah, the depression piece of loss after dealing with depression.
I feel like I had a weird experience with this because I don't know if I like experienced this, because I think I was just, it felt kind of just like my baseline. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does make sense.
Like,
I'm a very sad girl.
like,
so yeah, my baseline is sad. I get that.
I just thought that was how I would feel. No, like this is just who I am.
I'll always
now.
be this way.
And it's true and it's not true, right?
Yeah.
Because nothing changes.
No, to your point earlier, I know for a fact both of us would do absolutely anything to bring our brothers back right now. Yeah.
But also, you still get to have happy moments. I think that as someone who is especially like, I got engaged after losing Brady, I got married after losing Brady, I'm going to have all of the quote unquote happiest days of my life without one of my most important people.
Yeah.
And that has been really interesting to navigate because I can't let it not allow me to be happy.
Yes.
But also, would I be happier? Yes. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I would be, I don't know.
No, and to your point, I think that for me, like, that was my experience with the depression piece, is that, I mean, I've struggled with being a sad person the majority of my life for a lot of reasons. I definitely think it runs in the family, but there's also just like a lot of intergenerational complex trauma. And that is not to say that my family isn't amazing. Everybody does the best that they can do with the tools and the knowledge that they have at the time. And that is the truth. But for me, dealing with depression was like very similar, where it was just like the happy moments are happy, but there's almost like this gray.
There's an emptiness.
Yeah, there's like this gray space, this gray gradient that kind of fills in the empty corners of these like light, happy moments where it's like, oh yes, this is great. And then there's almost like that instant thought of like, I wish, he could be here to experience this with me. Or I wish I could call him and tell him about this.
When Mike and I got engaged, I remember I was so happy. We were so happy and we were so excited. And
because you guys are the cutest couple.
It took us a long time to get there. And we were calling all of our people. And it was like calling my mom and then calling my sister and calling my best friend. And I was like, this is fucked.
Yeah.
It's so fucked. Like, and it's like, on the one hand, I know that he knows. He's aware. He's seeing everything. He's here. He's excited. We can feel it. But like, to not be able to, it's like, again, it feels selfish. It's like, I want the experience of telling my brother.
I think it can. I feel like, I understand what you're saying.
He loved Mike so much. And when he passed, we had been together for like 4 years, and he was like begging Mike to put a baby in me. Spoiler alert, we've been together almost 9 years, and that's not on the horizon anytime soon.
Not for now.
But I just wish he would have been able to see us get there.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. Like, we lost James 2020, and then later that year, me and my partner moved into our it's like the cutest little home. I love our place. I'm like so obsessed with it. And the first thing I wanted to do was show my brother. I wanted to be able to have him over to visit. We could have like, a movie night, chill, talk. And I think my initial thought, I was kind of stuck between, because it all happened in the same year. So I remember when we moved in, I was stuck a little in depression and also like that denial phase where I was like, well, if I could just get him over here to talk to me, maybe I can help him.
Yeah.
And it was like that realization of like, oh, I know because of my spiritual practice and my spiritual beliefs, I know he knows. I know he's seen my home. I know he's in my home all the time. His energy is, his love is, but like it's not the same.
You still want the real thing.
And I think that's the important thing to say. Like, even when you're coming from a spiritual, open-minded perspective, whether it's religious or spiritual, whatever it be, there's still that layer of like, it doesn't matter if I can meditate and feel like I'm connected with him or see him in my dreams or even feel his energy. It would still be
nice to be able to watch them live their lives.
Exactly.
And get what you signed up for. Like, and get what you were sold and like told and promised. And again, it's not anyone's fault, obviously, but like, yes, it's amazing that we still feel connected with them and we know that they're here and we know that they're with us and we know that we can tell them about things.
Yeah.
But I would rather watch my brother like grow up and live his life and like 21 and 22, like
that's bullshit. It's way too fucking young.
It's bullshit.
Way too young. I think the 5th stage is going to be interesting to talk about because I think we're both still getting there.
Yes.
Which is acceptance. Yeah. And to be fair, like, again, the 5th stage, for lack of a better verbiage, because it's not like these happen in order. They happen.
It's not like you made
simultaneously all over the place, here, there, and everywhere, multiple times in our life do they come up. So, but the final stage, apparently, is acceptance. I actually think that acceptance comes in waves, just like every other phase. I feel like
it's not a completion phase.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, okay, here's your A+, so you finished class. It's more of a like, okay, we've accepted this portion of the processing and now we're going to move on.
I think that it comes in waves. I think acceptance specifically comes in waves just because I think it's going to come with every milestone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like when I finally have kids, I'm going to have to, like, I'm doing everything I can to prepare myself, but I'm going to have to sit down with the fact that, like, my children are not going to know their uncle.
Yeah.
An uncle who would have loved to be their uncle.
Yeah.
You know? And
Gemini boys are really fun, and that's exactly what every kid needs for an uncle, is a fun uncle.
Well, they're going to get a Gemini boy for a dad, so.
Bases are covered.
We've got that part. But just, like, you know, I'm going to have to learn how to tell my children about their uncle that they're never going to know.
Yeah.
And
then also that's going to be a process too of like, because kids are, you know, it can be hard for them to process and like understand that stuff. Yeah. So like, I would imagine, I don't know, I don't have kids, I haven't gotten there, but like, I would imagine that also is going to add a layer of like how they receive it. Mm-hmm. If they're, interested in knowing more about their uncle. Yeah. You know, like I feel like that adds.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah. And I feel like it's also acceptance to me doesn't just feel like the acceptance of the fact that my brother is dead. Like it's accepting all of the other, like, what does that mean?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well, because I think once you go through denial in full, and again, it's not a one and done, but I think once you, I don't want to say in full. Once you make it probably most of the way through denial and bargaining, I think that's where you probably hit that acceptance piece of like, they're gone. Because I'm definitely not still accepting that he's dead. He's dead. There's nothing either of us can do about that. But I think, yeah, to your point, it's accepting those milestones and the nuances that come with those.
Yeah. I think with Brady, I'm trying to like pinpoint, like, was there a moment where I accepted that, like, at what point was I like, yes, okay, I'm never going to see my brother again?
That's a good question.
I think being a spiritual person, I almost have bypassed that in a way because I'm like, I know he's here and I know that he's... The way that I explain it to people is I feel like I signed up for this.
Yeah, we've talked about this, like soul contracts.
Yeah. And so I feel as though I knew and he knew that he was only going to be here for a short time.
Yeah.
And we were like, you know what? We love each other. Let's be brother and sister in this life, even if it's
going to be hard.
Not as long as we would like.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting take. And I think it's interesting because, like, I think for me, I remember the day. I remember the day. And my poor neighbors, all parents' neighbors, probably also remember the day because it was acceptance and anger in the same moment. I was like out in the garden, which was very therapeutic and healing for me, which is actually probably why I finally got to a point where I could cry about it, because I had a really long period of time where I was just like numb after he died, and I like was trying to process things, but I couldn't, like my brain couldn't. Yeah. And
your brain really stops working.
Yeah, your brain like just shuts down for a hot second. And I remember being in my parents' backyard working on the garden, and it was like the most insignificant thing. Like, I think I went out and I think I saw that my tallest sunflower had been decimated by the asshole squirrels that were living in my in my parents', backyard or whatever. And I am not like a reactive, angry person. Mm-hmm. I flipped a fucking shit. Like this was like out of a movie. I like ripped the sunflower out of the ground. Mind you, I'm 5 feet tall and it was like an 8-foot sunflower. Probably very interesting to watch that from my neighbor's perspective. But I was like wailing and screaming, and I was like throwing things around the garden, and which is like, I have to be so clear, that's not like me. Like I don't get angry like that. And then I just remember like falling to the ground, and I was like hysterically sobbing for like probably a good 10 to 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I remember like in that moment, that's when I was like, fuck, I never fucking get to see him again. This is so fucked up. Yeah. And that was my acceptance moment of like that piece.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I kept finding myself saying, and my mom too, it was like our only communication was, because it's like you cry everything out. There's nothing left to give energetically in those first few days, especially.
Yeah, those first few days are exhausting.
And whenever my mom and I would just go to like talk to each other about it, I would just be like, this just sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like it's so beyond fucked up, and it's so beyond what your brain can comprehend. Mm-hmm. And it just was like, so I don't think I've told you this, but I probably should have mentioned this during the anger phase, because I don't really know where we were at when this happened.
Well, that's okay, because that's what we do when we're going through not depression, or going through grief. We bounce all over the place.
So when it was I wish I could ask Mike. I don't think it was the night of, I think it was like the second night that we were up in Maine. So he had been gone for a day. Mm-hmm. And that evening,
those first 24 hours are fucking horrible.
We were mad.
Oh,
we were getting, because we'd finally kind of figured out the pieces of what happened. And when we found out what happened, we were like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
And my family, being the good old Mainers that we are, we were like, what would Brady do right now with this anger?
Right.
So we went out back and we all chopped some wood.
I love that though. That's like that's the main version of break rooms, man.
No, we really did. We just went out back and we all took turns with the axe.
That's amazing.
And chopped some wood.
I actually love that. So my good friend Kara, who shout out, love her. Her and my friend Jared. I think I might have mentioned this in one of our other episodes. But I did not tell anyone that James died because I couldn't face it in the first 24 to 48 hours. And I don't remember if it was the next day. I think it was literally the next morning. I found out, and then it was like literally the next morning, I'm pretty sure. My friend Kara and my friend Jared were like at my doorstep, and they were like, hey, babe, let's go. Let's go. And Kara was, oh my God, I love this girl. She was so amazing while I was dealing with this, and she was so good at showing up for me in ways that like some of my other friends really struggled to show up for me, which we will get into in our next episode. But I was really grateful she brought over a homemade dartboard, and we got like the biggest darts that we could find, like the heaviest, most aggressive darts we could find.
Move energy.
Yeah, and I just like, oh my God, I broke so many things. And even the day that I was sharing about earlier, where I finally hit that wall of acceptance of like, fuck, he's gone and I'm never gonna see him again, where I was like tearing my garden apart. there was a part of me that was like really embarrassed, that I was like, oh my God, like I hope my parents' neighbors don't think I'm fucking insane. And then there was a part of me that was like, oh my God, it felt so good to just like throw things and like allow myself to be angry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Grief is interesting.
So how do we wrap this up neatly in a bow for everyone? What would you say to somebody, because we were talking about this earlier before we started filming, but what would you say to somebody who just lost a sibling?
To somebody who just lost a sibling, I think my 2 to 3 big pieces of advice would be allow yourself the space and the time that you need. I feel like we live in a world and a society where there's like so much pressure put on work and our productivity. And I have to tell you that like your sibling doesn't care if you go back to work. Honestly, your boss can replace you. Like that was the biggest thing I think I learned in this experience. Like, not that work doesn't matter. That's the reality we live in. You got to work to pay your bills, but you have to give yourself the time and the space. I think that was like one big takeaway I had. And then I think maybe the second one would be try to just give yourself and the people around you grace. Nobody expected this. Nobody knows how to fucking deal with this. I know for me I had periods where I was angry at my parents, and it's not that I was angry because I was blaming them. It was just, I think that's the natural flow of grief, is like you project things on different people based on like the relationship you or your sibling had with them. So like just give yourself and the people around you grace. Don't shove it down. Allow yourself to feel your feelings, but like also with grace.
I think I would say, kind of off of what you're saying, but like allow yourself to feel whatever it is you're feeling, because there's a lot that's going to come up all at the same time.
Yeah. And from a therapist, well, I'm not a therapist, from a mental health worker's perspective, there is no right or wrong way to feel. I feel like we have this perception in our society where like, oh, anger is bad. Sadness is bad. Your feelings are not good or bad. They just are.
Yeah. I feel like it's so nuanced. Like there's so many different aspects. Like you're going to feel certain things towards your sibling, for your sibling. You're going to feel different things towards whatever you have for family, whether it's parents, other siblings. Like you're going to have different dynamics happening there.
Yeah.
You're going to have different feelings coming up around your friends. You're going to have different feelings coming up around how other people are handling the situation.
Yes, you
which
are.
is what our next episode is going to cover a little bit more.
Yeah.
But just give yourself grace to just exist. And you don't have to fucking do anything.
No. Oh my gosh. No. I mean, I this is gross, but I'm going to be totally honest. I definitely did not brush my teeth for like 3 days after James died. And I was a vegan pretty hardcore at the time. I'm pretty sure I ate steak and cheese for like 2 days in a row. Yeah. So the rules don't apply. Whatever rules you live by, take that rule book and, you know what? Set it on fire.
I don't think I would have eaten at all if my husband wasn't literally like cooking and
the only reason why I ate is because like, people were showing up with food. I have an amazing group of like childhood friends that I danced with that sent me like soup and bread, and like I wouldn't have eaten if it weren't for the people bringing me food.
So take care of yourself.
Yes.
Try to be mindful of that, but also if you're on autopilot, that's very okay. Just make sure you come up for air.
Yeah. Yeah. And on taking care of yourself, I also want to state like, yes, take care of your people, because this is going to be a time where you all have to lean on each other. But don't project what you need onto other people. Like don't put other people before you put yourself, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. We took it in shifts with who was having breakdowns.
Yes, that's exactly how my family did it.
Really, like me, my sister, my mom, my dad, everyone who was coming in and out, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. No one was ever like we allowed each other, the space to.
And I think that's the best thing that you can do in this process, because grief is weird. Grief is messy. grief happens so differently for everybody, especially based on the relationship that you have with the person who was lost.
Yeah.
So grace, space, self-care.
And talk about them.
Talk about them. I used to hate talking about James because it made me really sad. I missed him. I love talking about my brother now because I realize it took me some time to get there, but I realize like that's how we keep them alive. And that's how I don't forget.
Yeah. So we love you guys.
Yes, we do.
We will see you in the next episode.
Can't wait.